You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Justice is Served. This is the show where we give you the latest in legal news. I am your host, Mari Fagel, and I'm joined today by my lovely co-host, Rawa Ghebre-Ab.
Hello, everyone.
And we have two special guest callers on the line, Professors Charis Kubrin and Erik Nielson. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Hello.
And I want to tell my viewers first, before we get into the interview, about how I came to book you both as guests. For the viewers who've tuned into our shows in the past, we did a show on their op-ed that they published in the New York Times called Rap Lyrics on Trial. It was specifically about the case of Vontae Skinner, a man sentenced to 30 years for attempted murder on very weak evidence. Much of the evidence that convicted him was rap lyrics that he had written before the crime. That case is building its way up to the Supreme Court now, the New Jersey State Supreme Court, and we will ask both Charis and Erik about an update on that case. But first, once I read that op-ed, I was really outraged about kind of this phenomenon going on of rap lyrics being used as evidence against criminal defendants in trials, because in my mind, for the most part, that would be prejudicial information that would bias a jury. What I mean by that is a jury or the finder of fact would, hear evidence of these violent rap lyrics and make the assumption or the leap that because this person wrote those lyrics, this person has a predisposition to be violent. That must mean that this person committed that crime. And in my mind, that is so unfair. It was troubling to hear that phenomenon is going on. So Charis and Erik, first I wanted to ask you, you wrote this study I have in my hand, Rap on Trial. Tell me about how you came to collaborate, and tell me specifically about the Odewale case, which brought the two of you together.
Sure, I'll jump in on that. And in fact, the outrage that you're expressing is exactly what brought Erik and I together to collaborate on this paper. But I was contacted back in 2011 by a lawyer who had come across a paper that I had written that involved an analysis of 400 gangster rap songs, and the lawyer was interested in knowing whether I'd be willing to serve as an expert witness on the Odewale case. And this basically involved a case where Odewale was a student at Edwardsville University in Southern Illinois University, and his car ran out of gas, forcing him to abandon it on campus. And when the school authorities found his car, they found a piece of paper in the car's console that was hidden. And on one side was lyrics, everybody agreed was lyrics. And on the other side of the note was more lyrics followed by 6 lines of text. And this is upon which the entire case rests, these 6 lines of text. The state basically claimed that these were a threat, and Tosin in his defense claimed that they were essentially new ideas for a new rap song or the beginning stages of rap lyrics. And so they asked me to come on and analyze these 6 lines of text in the context of hundreds and hundreds of pages of rap lyrics that Tosin himself had created. And I was called on to testify, where I explained what rap music was. I discussed the subgenre of gangster rap. I provided lots of examples of it in his notebooks. I talked about the 6 lines of text, made numerous examples, and then at the end of the day, they declared Tosin guilty, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Now, at the time, I didn't know Erik, but he was also outraged by this case and was writing op-eds. And we got introduced through the lawyer on this case, started talking, and realized this is not just a case that's happening with Olutosin Odewale. This is actually happening more and more often.
And I just want to let our viewers know some of those 6 lines that ended up becoming the basis of his conviction for making a threat or making a terrorist threat. It says, Glock to the head of send $2 to PayPal account. If this account doesn't reach $50,000 in the next 7 days, then a murderous rampage similar to the VT shooting will occur at another highly populated university. This is not a joke. These were just words that were found in a compartment in his car. Correct?
Yeah, and I mean, initially, these are very strong lyrics. They evoke a lot of violence. There's an apparent quote-unquote threat involved. But if you looked in the context of all of the lyrics that Tosin himself had written over the years as an aspiring rapper, and nobody doubted that he was an aspiring rapper, these were pretty par for the course for the kinds of lyrics that he wrote. And frankly, these are just basic gangster rap lyrics. People that listen to gangster rap know the subgenre. These are common lyrics for that kind of subgenre.
Charis, I'd be really curious to know what the composition of the jury was, if you can recall, and if you feel that had an impact on...
It was all white.
Yeah, and I will never forget
Thanks,
the day I walked into the courtroom to testify and looked over at the jury, and not only were they all white, but they were typically older, and I later found out almost none of them had any experience listening to rap music, let alone gangster rap. So that was the context in which they were hearing these lyrics.
Well, that explains a lot.
And your question about the jury also sort of, it raises the racial implications of this discussion, and it probably doesn't come as a surprise to you or to anybody who sort of is engaged in this conversation that the vast majority of the defendants in these cases are young men of color. And so, I think your question was sort of starting to get at some of the underlying issues at work here too.
And the Odawale case was unique in that the lyrics themselves and the words he wrote themselves were the basis of the crime that he was charged with. But several of the other cases that you profile in your study are, violent crimes that these people are charged with, but then the lyrics being used as evidence. So I want to talk about one of those cases that you mentioned in the study, just because of it really jumped out to me because of the stark sentence of death in this case. This man was sentenced to death. Ronell Wilson was charged with killing 2 detectives in Brooklyn. When the police arrested him, they found scraps of paper in his pocket with handwritten rap lyrics discussing a killing. Those rap lyrics were introduced at trial, and he was ultimately found guilty and then sentenced to death. Can you tell me about that case and what effect you think the reading of the rap lyrics had on his verdict?
Well, I want to back up just for a second and say that the Odawale case is not as unique as we may have initially thought. You noted that was a case where the lyrics themselves were the contents of the lyrics themselves were the sole basis for these charges. And in fact, we're turning up more and more of those cases where the actual rap lyrics are being treated as, for example, terrorist threats or threats against other individuals. And I could probably name a few cases right now where that's going on. In the case of, but you are right, the vast majority of cases that we're finding involve rap lyrics as evidence of a defendant's involvement in some other crime, right? You're accused of murder, bring in rap lyrics, gangster rap lyrics that have these depictions of murder, and you sort of try to connect the dots. The Ronell Wilson case is interesting. It went on for a number of years, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure if the lyrics were introduced during the guilt phase, but they were certainly introduced during the sentencing phase. And that is something that we're finding more and more of as well. I mean, as Charis and I have explored this topic and started researching it in real detail, what we're finding is that rap lyrics are showing up at all stages of the criminal justice process. So, and that makes it very, very difficult, frankly, to quantify. But it means that we're seeing cases where people are being indicted thanks to rap lyrics. In fact, we're looking at a case right now out in California involving rap videos that ended up in the indictment of an aspiring rapper. We're finding them in trials. We're finding them in sentencing hearings. We're finding that they become, less officially, they become leverage for prosecutors to compel a plea bargain. Because, of course, defendants and their defense attorneys are not stupid. They know how, as you said at the beginning, how prejudicial, how powerful these can be. And so to take it back to the Ronell Wilson case, I can't tell you in that case what role the rap lyrics played, but I can tell you that based upon our research and some empirical research conducted, in the 1990s, for example, that they do exert a significant impact on jurors.
In your experience, how would you say that prosecutors are actually accounting for these cases or these instances where rap lyrics are written or composed months or years ahead of or before any alleged incidents occur? I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts on that.
The motive or intent. I mean, those are they have two ways really. I mean, I don't want to get too caught up in the legal justifications because regardless of how they're doing it, the underlying assumption is that they're just negating rap music as art, and suggesting or saying outright that they are accurate reflections of the author's mindset or behavior. But in the case of lyrics that are written well in advance, they introduce them as evidence of a defendant's knowledge, identity, that kind of thing with respect to the crime. That's what they say. But that is not, in my view, why they are actually bringing them in. Generally, you can't say to the judge, I would like to bring these in to smear the defendant's character. But that is, I believe, exactly what they're trying to do. So that they will look for any legal justification they can to get the lyrics in front of the jury so that they can achieve the prejudicial effects they can't admit that they're trying to achieve.
And I just want to explain to some of our viewers and listeners that normally past acts, past incidents, past behavior by a defendant would be considered character evidence that cannot be used in the present case against them. But there are certain exceptions to that general rule, and the exceptions would be if those prior acts or prior instances of behavior go to the defendant's motive, the reason why they decided to carry out the crime, go to knowledge, I knew it was illegal, go to their intent, I planned to do this, go to their identity, this person has acted this way in so many specific instances, these several times, it has to be this person. So there's certain exceptions where prior acts are able to be introduced to a jury, and it is the judge's role as the gatekeeper of facts to decide what the jury can and cannot hear. It is the judge's role to weigh the evidence and decide whether the jury hearing that information will be unfairly biased, and they will make an assumption that's outside of the facts of the case. They will make an assumption because this person wrote these rap lyrics, months before this crime, that must mean that they committed this crime. So tell me, Charis and Erik, how is it, do you think that judges are lacking in their role as gatekeeper?
I mean, I think
Charis,
judges,
you want to handle that?
Yeah. I was going to say, I think judges are no different from a lot of the players in the courtroom, which is that they don't have intimate knowledge about rap music themselves. And so I'm not quite sure that it's intentional, but on the other hand, they're also assuming that these are autobiographical confessions of behavior, right? Or, and the assumptions along with that is then therefore, right, it should be admitted as evidence, and we certainly don't need an expert witness or someone else to explain the lyrics because there's nothing to explain. It's just somebody confessing to a crime, right? But I do think judges need to be held accountable for the fact that they are letting these lyrics in. I mean, one question I get a lot is, well, are defense attorneys putting up a fight to have these lyrics out? And the answer is absolutely yes. Every defense attorney I've spoken with, and in the cases that I've testified in, they are filing pretrial motions. They are collecting as much information about how these lyrics are problematic as evidence. They're
calling us
with Erik and I. Exactly. I mean, we've been getting so many calls and requests for this paper, partly because this is a new issue, but it's becoming a very common issue. And how do they explain to the judge and the prosecutor and the juries that this is not right as evidence, that this is artistic expression? It is not literal. It's not literal.
And they make they make salient points. Their claim, the arguments that defense attorneys generally make are, in my mind, the ones I've seen, and I've seen a number of them, are thorough. They're on point, but they usually fail. So judges will hear these and still admit rap lyrics as evidence. I mean, the New Jersey ACLU took a small subset of cases. I think they looked at like 18 maybe. It was 18. And they found in these 18 cases, where the admissibility of rap lyrics was at issue, almost 80% of the time they were allowed in as evidence. And it's judges not just at the trial level who are asleep at the wheel, but it's also at the appellate level. Because when these cases go on for appeal, they are generally unsuccessful also. Either the appellate court will say, yeah, the lyrics were admissible, or they will find, well, yeah, it was probably an error, but it would not have impacted the overall outcome, that it was a harmless error. And so judges throughout this process are, in my view, improperly admitting this art as evidence.
At first glance, the dangers in using a form of artistic expression to convict seem really dangerous, particularly since it seems limited to rap music. I mean, we're not seeing people in rock really being
pop,
pop, or writers of books, or in other mediums, artistic mediums. But short of prohibiting lyrics as evidence in cases like the Vontae Skinner case, what can be done to address these inherent biases that mostly young black men are confronted with? I know that's I know. It's a big umbrella.
Yeah.
A lot of answers.
Yeah, you want to take the bigger picture, and I'll take the more practical right now, what we can do?
No, I wanted you to have the bigger picture.
Well, I mean, the bigger picture is Erik and I feel that lyrics should not be permitted, period. I mean, and especially, I mean, if lyrics are the basis of your case, you have no case. That's something that we argue, right? The lyrics of songs are speech, and we know the First Amendment protects expression even when it's offensive, which rap music certainly can be. But still, rap music, no matter how violent the imagery or how misogynistic the views expressed, we feel is constitutionally protected speech, and it should be treated as such in the way that we treat other, other forms of artistic expression. That said, I don't see that. Yeah, sorry, Erik, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I would also add that let's go ahead and apply rules that are already there. You mentioned rules of evidence that a judge is supposed to sort of weigh the probative value or the usefulness of the evidence against its prejudicial impact, or what it might cause a jury to do, what kinds of decisions it might cause a jury to make. And I really can't think of any scenario, in which rap music will pass that test. It is a fictional form. It is one that has a long tradition of exaggeration, and in the case of the gangsta subgenre, a long tradition of graphic depictions of violence. But it's also one that has a long tradition of figurative rather than literal language. We're talking metaphors, similes. That makes it inherently unreliable as evidence, and so I think that significantly undermines any probative value. At the same time, we know that they will be highly prejudicial. So I wouldn't stop short of saying that you should never use lyrics. I would say you should never use lyrics.
And let me add one thing, sort of a practical, because I think that, that's sort of the big picture goal here. On the other hand, right, as we sit here talking on the phone, individuals are being tried with the lyrics. And so I do think, Erik and I say this in our paper, we do think it's really important for, at a minimum, those involved in the courts to be cognizant of rap as a complex, highly sophisticated form of poetry with lyrics that by convention, rely on things like hyperbole, metaphor, right? And that those that are involved in these cases need to be careful not to assume that the lyrics are autobiographical or inculpatory, right? That's kind of a message that needs to be expressed to the players involved, especially the jurors, because if they have no prior knowledge about rap music and they're hearing these lyrics for the first time, it is going to be impactful. And so providing the context for them in which to interpret the lyrics, I think, is very, very important.
And now, Erik, you mentioned that it is rare that an appellate court will say that the use of evidence is indeed prejudicial, but that is what happened in the Vontae Skinner case. In that case, it has gone up to the state Supreme Court. So tell me what's happening in that case, because we want to have you back on in the future, hopefully, once that case progresses, because it could be kind of a solution, at least in that state, if the state Supreme Court does decide that the use of this evidence was indeed prejudicial.
That's right. I mean, and you're right that there have been some notable exceptions to the claim I made that appeals are generally fail. For example, the Massachusetts Supreme Court a year or two ago overturned a verdict based upon the inappropriate use of rap videos. And there was another one, I think, a year before that in Maryland. So there have been some cases. However, the majority have gone the other way, the most recent being the Nevada Supreme Court, which, although it was a split decision like the New Jersey decision, they did find that the rap lyrics were admissible. Now, in this case, poor Vontae Skinner, he's had to wait a long time, and the arguments have been put off twice due to weather. They are scheduled, I believe, and this isn't posted to the New Jersey Supreme Court website yet, but I've heard this from the New Jersey ACLU that April 9th is the date for arguments. And how they rule could have some effect. Certainly, as you said, in the state of New Jersey, but it depends on what they do. I mean, the New Jersey ACLU wants them to, obviously find that this is, that these lyrics were not, should not have been admitted as evidence, but also wants the court to provide stricter guidelines for lower courts to use when deciding whether or not to admit this kind of evidence. And while I'm very skeptical that it will go far enough if they do that, that would be a useful and important first step in this broader discussion.
Well, we'll see what happens in that case. That would be a step in the right direction. I want to ask you both where our viewers and listeners, if they want to find out more, where they can reach you both and learn more about Rap on Trial.
Well, we have our paper posted in several locations, including our web pages. So you can find me on the UCI Department of Criminology Law and Society webpage under Charis Kubrin, with access to the paper and other related papers there.
Right, and the journal that we published our longer study in is called Race and Justice, and the paper is published there online. The print edition will be available. And for people who just want a sort of primer on the issue, I think our New York Times op-ed, the one that you sort of opened with, would be a good starter. I've written a couple of op-eds for the Atlantic and Huffington Post that sort of cover similar ground but with other cases. That's a good way to start, but I think the paper that we just published a couple of weeks ago in Race and Justice will provide the best overview. Oh, and also Andrea Dennis, who's at the University of Georgia Law School, she's a professor there, she wrote what is probably the seminal paper on this topic in 2007. And so I forget the exact name of the journal that it appears in, but it's a law review article. It's Andrea Dennis, 2007. That is also a really, really good and important article on this.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today. I really appreciate having an honest conversation about this issue, because when I first read about it, as I said, I was outraged. So I was happy to see, Erik, you reached out to me on Twitter after our episode aired, and I'm very happy to have you both discuss this important issue with us. And thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us and for drawing attention to this.
Well, that was Erik Nielson and Charis Kubrin. If you want to look up more, they said it's in Race and Justice, Rap on Trial. We will come back to discuss our 3 cases for on the docket, our legal roundup of news of the week. But before we do, we have a quick video from our founders of Black Hollywood Live, Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. The 2 of them are in an amazing new reality show called Chasing Maria Menounos. I just watched the first episode on Tuesday, and here we have the video for you guys.
Tuesdays on Oxygen.
I'm Maria Menounos, and my life can get a little crazy. I host Extra. I'm an actor, producer, dancer, wrestler, and a lot of other things. I live with Kevin, my boyfriend of 15 years. Do you really love me?
I would say that I'm in serious like.
And my parents. Yep, I just said I live with my parents.
You drive me crazy.
You drive me crazy. My parents want us to get married.
You both love each other. Get married.
Kevin and I don't. I am going to get married when I want to get married. I think I want kids. Kevin definitely doesn't want them now.
This is being pushed on to us.
And of course, my parents wanted them yesterday.
This year, you gotta have it.
And I have a house full of people counting on me financially. If I take my eye off the ball, everything can fall apart.
It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or wants us to do. It's what we want to do.
Everyone thinks that they know what's best for me, but I'm really the only one. I have got to figure things out.
Chasing Maria Menounos is so new. Every Tuesday at 10, 9 Central, starting March 18th, only on Oxygen.
Okay, and we're back. We've got 3 stories to talk about today on the docket, and let's go ahead and kick this off. First one, Oscar Pistorius. The trial in South Africa is in its 3rd week now, and a lot has happened in the past week. I know we've covered the trial in weeks past here on the show, but there have been some developments. First, a police ballistics expert testified, and it wasn't a pretty sight. Oscar was visibly sickened by the description of the gunshots to his now deceased girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp.
Visibly sickened, meaning his fingers were in his ears going like that for the judge to see.
He looked like he was going to throw up.
Which he already has twice.
Yes, so it wouldn't have been wholly surprising if it had happened again. But the description of the bullet wounds was particularly gruesome. There was also a blood spatter analyst who testified as to where the blood went based on the various shots to Rena. And there was also testimony from the man who devised South Africa's gun safety laws, saying that Oscar essentially broke every law of gun safety when he fired off into his bathroom. I'd really like to know what you've covered this case and this trial for some time now, and you've covered it really well, Mari. So I'd be curious to know what are your thoughts on the testimony of the ballistics expert? I mean, when he described those bullets, how they were the type of bullets that when shot, they almost expand like talons, essentially tearing out people's insides when they're shot, or the target's insides when they're shot, and all the different places in which the victim was shot as well. What do you make of it?
I mean, it was very graphic, gruesome testimony. You mentioned that Oscar Pistorius had a visual reaction to it. Her mother was there when this was going on as well. It was just interesting to me, the pattern of how it happened. She was first hit in her right hip. She then crossed her arms over her head and it bruised her back. Then the 3rd and 4th shots were in her right arm and her head. I know that they were very fast, but in my mind, if the first hit was to the hip, you would scream. Even if it's happening very fast, boom, 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 right arm, head. It all happened very fast, but in my mind, it wasn't like the head came first, because if the shot to the head came first, then I would believe Oscar in saying he didn't know who it was and that there were no woman screams. But the fact that the first shot came to the hip, in my mind, would make sense why the neighbors, the ear witnesses, heard a woman's blood-curdling scream. So to me, the pattern was interesting. Another thing that was interesting to me, and I want to ask you about this, Rawa, was the gun safety expert you mentioned. You know, he said that he broke every gun safety law in the book. He said that Oscar knew these laws. Oscar had taken gun safety courses. He knew what was reasonable and what was not. Obviously, there was evidence last week about, you know, him shooting through the sunroof of a car, a gun going off in a restaurant. You know, he has been very risky with guns in the past, but it was important to me, this gun safety expert, saying he knew the law and he broke every rule in the book. The reason why, in my mind, that's so important is because that, I think, will stop him from getting acquitted of this murder fully. Basically, he could either be found guilty of premeditated murder, meaning he intended to kill Riva Steenkamp. He knew it was her. He intended to kill her, which is what the prosecution is claiming. You know, they had a loud argument. She went into the bathroom to hide. He intended to kill her. Or a lesser charge, kind of a culpable homicide, of that even if he didn't know who was behind that door, it was not reasonable to shoot through the door. Mm-hmm. It was unreasonable to not know who was on the other side of that door and shoot through it 4 times anyways. Or he can be acquitted fully. If he's acquitted, they must find, or I'm sorry, I say they because it's juries normally. Here it's just a judge. The judge must find that he, you know, believed it was an intruder on the other side of that door, and he acted reasonably in shooting through that door 4 times. So in my mind, the gun safety expert saying that his actions were not reasonable essentially gets him, to the very least, guilty of a lesser charge, which I just want to update our viewers and listeners on the poll I've had on my blog, yourlegallady.com, as to what the verdict will be. Only 40% right now believe that he will be found guilty of premeditated murder. 60% believe he will be found guilty of a lesser charge, such as culpable homicide. None believe he'll be acquitted. But it is interesting how that's shaping out. If you want to cast your vote, go to yourlegallady.com. What do you think about those numbers, and what's your prediction?
Well, as to the implausibility of acquittal, I'm with everybody else and you. It's just not going to happen, in my opinion. As to the gun safety, as the gun safety expert, I have some questions. I mean, in the heat of the moment, when you are in your home and you think that there's an intruder, are you necessarily going to follow all the right rules, all the right laws? And I think there's an argument to be made for that. I don't think it will completely absolve him of any culpability, but I do think that it plays a role in the doubt. I mean, I think that, of course, it's not the same, but with regard to traffic laws, I mean, all of us who drive, we had to pass some type of licensing exam and presumably a driver's test. And there are times when even the best of us drivers could not necessarily follow all the rules involved with driving. But does that necessarily go to culpability or go to intent? Not necessarily. I think there's definitely a heat of argument case to be made here. So we will see how this plays out. There's some interesting things happening in terms of the prosecution wrapping up the case early. Just on Wednesday, I believe, the prosecutor initially listed 107 witnesses to be called, and on Wednesday stated that he was close to wrapping up his case, and only 18 have testified to date. So there are a couple ways this could go. Maybe there's some big new smoking gun that the prosecution needs to evaluate, or maybe the case is turned for the worst, and the prosecutor doesn't think that this is going to go in the direction that he'd like it to. So we'll see how this plays out.
Or maybe they're just keeping the defense on their toes. Oftentimes they'll present a long list so that the defense thinks, I have to prepare for all 107 of these witnesses, and they're not sure as to who they're actually going to call when it gets to trial. Right.
Yeah, we'll continue to see how this plays out, monitor it, and talk about it some more as the trial continues. Next case. Next issue, Chris Brown.
A regular on this show, Chris Brown, he is.
A regular on the show, and this time it makes me so sad. It really does, because I think since the last time we've discussed him, I mean, a few things have come out about Chris Brown. He was recently diagnosed with bipolar II disorder and also post-traumatic stress disorder. And the current situation right now is a judge has ordered Chris Brown to remain in jail in Los Angeles until April 23rd because of alleged violations while he was in rehab. And this complicates a case that he has that's pending in Washington, D.C., where he allegedly punched a man in the nose for attempting to take a photograph. And there's a hearing in that case the week before Chris can get out of jail. So there are a lot of complications right now, and the issue at stake here is Chris may be in violation of his probation. And so there is going to be a hearing after on April 23rd, and at that point, the prosecution only has to prove by a preponderance of evidence, which is essentially the proposition is more likely than not to have happened. The prosecution has to prove that that Chris violated the terms of his probation. And according to the rehab center, what we're hearing, what we're reading, and I'm not sure if all of this is confirmed yet, but what we're reading is he violated a rule that he must stay away from all female rehabbers, and apparently or allegedly he touched one's shoulder, one's elbow. He left the facility for an unauthorized visit and refused a drug test, which later came back negative upon his return. So, I mean, when you look at those violations just alone, they don't really seem they don't seem like they would bring back an excessive punishment. But given his history, there's a lot at stake here. The judge could essentially sentence him to the maximum amount of imprisonment for the underlying offense, which was the 2009 beating of his then girlfriend, pop star Rihanna. And the underlying offense for which he is on probation has a term of, I think the maximum is 4 years. So we'll see how this plays out. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, he is a great attorney, Mark Geragos. I know Mark, and I just think he will keep him out of jail for that maximum amount. I don't know if he can keep him out forever, though. Right. But in my mind, I was thinking Mark Geragos just premiered a new show on CNN called Making the Case on Mondays. It's a great show. And he had to be in trial, or in court, I'm sorry, in Los Angeles this Monday for his client, Chris Brown, yet again. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder what he thought when he had to get that call again of, oh, Chris has landed himself back in jail because of some other probation violation. This is just one headache after the other. Right. And when he first took on Chris as a client, he told me that it was right after, like hours after he allegedly, or not allegedly, he beat Rihanna. Right. And in 2009, and he got a call from another attorney, and he said, "Who's Chris Brown and what's a Rihanna?" Because he had no idea who Chris Brown was. Now he very well knows who Chris Brown is as his client. Yeah. He says that he has a fond admiration for Chris Brown. I've talked to him about it, and hopefully we'll have him on our show in the future to discuss Chris Brown. But I think he will keep him out for that maximum 4 years, but I'm not sure as to this hearing that comes up April 23rd as to exactly what happened that led him to end up in jail. I mean, apparently he made threatening statements during a group session too, but the fact that he failed to take the drug test but then took it and it was negative, I mean, how did he touch the woman? If it truly was just on the shoulder or the elbow, you know, it depends on the severity of what's happened. Correct. But the fact that he is getting treatment for his bipolar disorder, for his PTSD, is a step in the right direction. And we have not heard from Chris Brown in a while. I mean, I told you that Chris Brown, I thought, was going to be the person we talked about most on this show. And then he's been silent the last couple months as he's been in rehab, and Justin Bieber has come and taken the reins of this show. Right. But now Chris Brown is coming back, and I thought that he was on the right path. So it's hard to see that you know, he isn't getting his anger under control. Right.
Yeah. Given his recent diagnoses, I really do hope that he is able to work this out. Wishing him the best. And let's wrap up with our last story. Kanye West.
Another favorite on this show.
Another favorite. So Kanye was sentenced to probation for assaulting a photographer, paparazzo, at Los Angeles International Airport last summer. And Gloria Allred, who we all know and love, represents the photographer, and she's saying that this is not sufficient, and she will still pursue, on behalf of her client, a vigorous civil lawsuit against the rapper. And this photographer is still allegedly suffering from physical and emotional wounds, and really believes that his case is very strong, and has not made it apparent that he's going to settle. I mean, it looks like he wants to take this case full throttle. Kanye being sentenced to probation, he also has been ordered to complete 24 anger management sessions and 250 hours of approved community service. So although the civil case or the criminal case is seems to be at bay right now, there's a whole civil component. I mean, he's being sued by this photographer, and the photographer does not want to settle. Usually in cases with Kanye, and it's sad that I even have to say that, in cases with Kanye, because there have been several, you see people who are maybe looking for a quicker payday, just want to settle, just want to get it out of the way. I mean, there was an incident where there was a young man who allegedly hurled racial epithets at his fiancée Kim Kardashian, and Kanye reacted in a way that apparently he had to pay a settlement out to this young man. It happened very quickly, and so he's a lightning rod for this type of thing, and I don't know how this is going to play out. I mean,
I know how it's going to play out. He's going to offer the big bucks eventually because he doesn't want to have a deposition. Like we saw with Justin Bieber, these celebrities, the people who sue them have leveraging power because they can say, either you offer me the big bucks or I'm going to depose you. That deposition can be leaked, as we saw with Justin Bieber, and you don't want that to happen as a celebrity. We saw with Paula Deen how far that can go. She lost her career over that, and then that case ended up being dismissed. Lady Gaga, too, was deposed in a case with her personal assistant.
Lil Wayne,
and
goes on.
Yeah, and that is kind of these people suing these celebrities have that bargaining power. They hold over their head. I will take this case all the way. I will depose you. I will get you in trial, have you on the witness stand. And celebrities who are in the public eye, for the most part, don't want that negative attention, so they settle for higher amounts than they probably should or would have because they want to stay out of the limelight. That's I have a feeling where that case will go, just because you mentioned in the past that's what Kanye's done in the past.
Right. The photographer, he could be blowing smoke because he seems like he wants to take this all the way and does not want to settle. So, but I don't know, depending on the amount that's offered, maybe.
Or Gloria Allred wants to take it all the way.
Exactly. So depending on the amount offered, maybe that is the direction in which it'll go. So we will keep our eyes peeled and keep you informed of how this turns out.
And mentioning Gloria Allred, her daughter Lisa Bloom will be on our show next month to discuss her new book, Suspicious Nation, about the Trayvon Martin case. So we look forward to that. As I said, go to yourlegallady.com, cast your votes in what verdict you think Oscar Pistorius will get. Right now, I said 60% believe he will be guilty of a lesser charge, 40% believe premeditated murder. Weigh in, let me know your thoughts, and thank you so much for joining us this week. We will be back next week for an all-new Justice is Served.
From producers Maria Menounos, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire BHL crew, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I'm your BHL announcer, Scipio. Instagram me at Planet Scipio. Thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for watching Black Hollywood Live on YouTube. For more in-depth interviews and news, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to share your opinion in the comment section below here. See you soon, everyone. Bye.